Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reading into Culture podcast. My name's Zara.
Hey, I'm Chris. Hey.
And we're joined today by Samantha.
Hi, so happy to be here.
Before we get started, would you like to talk a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to everyone listening?
Yeah, so I am Samantha Moya. Go by Sam a lot of the time. So it's funny to my advisor in graduate school was the only one that actually called me Samantha because he was like a stern father figure. But yeah, so I am from Colorado in the United States, specifically in Denver. I live kind of just outside of the Rocky Mountains. Love it here. Moved here for graduate school, actually. So I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico. So if anyone's seen the show Breaking Bad, or at least heard the show Breaking Bad, that's where I'm from. So yeah, I moved out here for graduate school. I got my PhD in political science in 2021 in graduate school. It's also where I met my husband, and we were like studying almost like virtually the same topics and subjects in graduate school. So he's from the East Coast. We moved out here to Colorado for graduate school, and then once he left the program, I graduated from the program, and we decided to stay in Colorado. So I teach courses now in political science at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I love teaching. I love being an educator. I love working with students who are just starting out in, kind of the beginning of their own careers, but also developing their own passions for learning and reading and writing. But as a writer, I've always written. It's writing, especially poetry, is probably one of the few, I guess you could say, like hobbies I don't have a memory of not having. So I was like, when I was a child, I wrote and illustrated short stories a lot. Mostly horror stories, which was interesting. I still have them, and I looked back at them recently, and they're like the kind, like the illustrations and stuff. It was the kind of thing where like you look at it now as like an adult, and you're like, why wasn't this child like in therapy? Like it was like that kind of thing, almost like like my teacher should have said something to my parents or something. But mostly well adjusted. Maybe I was working something out as a child, but yeah, I wrote a lot of short stories. I kind of transitioned more towards writing poetry as a teenager. It was just I was still am, but I was quite like reserved, awkward teenager. So I think writing poetry, reading in general, was always just writing. It was like an outlet for me as a youth, just kind of growing up. And then I started to take it more seriously, like as a pursuit, not necessarily like thinking about even like I'm going to pursue like my career in this, but as like a serious hobby, even like thinking about, just ways to get published, even, with my goal of eventually being able to publish like a manuscript of some sort. I started taking that more seriously, I think, like in graduate school. That's when I really started writing with a lot more intent to, how do I kind of coalesce some poems into a theme of some sort that I can, eventually kind of pull a manuscript together. And then that's how I just started publishing by submitting, individual poems to places and magazines and literary sites like your own. So that's a lot of my backstory. I like to write predominantly. It's sort of memoir-ish, I would think. I do pull a lot from my life and my own memories, but I like to sort of filter that by thinking about it also like more broadly and like with some sort of imagination. So it's kind of, you could say like vaguely memoir-ish or like autobiographical, but not entirely. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about that more when we talk about the poem, because that seems very very imaginative, but also vaguely close to life.
Yeah.
But before that, I would like to ask you about reading and especially poetry, and what kind of reading has influenced you both in your writing and just generally in your life.
Yeah, as far as poets go, I feel like I always feel like such a cliche, but Mary Oliver probably was the biggest, one of the biggest influences on me, like just even wanting to write poetry. There was a poem that I remember I read of hers in high school, and it was like one of those poems where I don't know, like you all have probably had these moments where you like read something or you see a film or something, and it's like you kind of feel like your life is like pre and post that piece of art. Like all art, you know, it kind of makes you think or makes you see the world in a different way. But there's really like some artists where it's like they deeply actually had a very specific influence on the way that I saw the world. And that poem was actually, I actually have it up on my phone now because uh, I knew we were probably gonna get into like influences and stuff. So the poem that I remember from high school is called "In Blackwater Woods," and it's not even like one of the poems that I think a lot of people really talk about as much as some of her other ones. But like the last few like stanzas of this poem were just the most like heart-wrenching like world-defining words for me. I'm actually going to read them now because I want to.
Yes,
Yeah, so those lines are: to live in this world you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. And to me that was just life. That was like life in like a few lines. And that really opened up the world for me. But and I still love Mary Oliver, but even as far as like my own writing goes, kind of thinking about like the memoirish side of things, Ocean Vuong has been really influential for me. We'll read anything of theirs. Ada Limon was big for me, Billy Collins. But in like high school, especially, she like Edna St. Vincent Millay and Sylvia Plath were very big for me. Those were the poets that I really engaged with, I think, on a personal level. But yeah, I mean, I could rattle off poets all day. Louise Gluck, Adrienne Rich, so many. But I read a lot outside of poetry too. I do feel influenced by essayists. I read a lot of Hanifa Durkheim, Rebecca Solnit. And I read a lot of short stories as well. Really gets the just thinking. I when I went to grad school, I didn't have as much time to read like heavy fiction, like very long stories. So I started reading a lot of short stories because that's as a graduate student who's reading a lot for school, that's kind of like what I had time to read for pleasure. So yeah, I read a lot of like sci-fi short stories and stuff. But yeah, as far as poets go, those were those ones that I previously named were the ones that I think really had an influence on like the thinking about like even like writing styles that I wanted to mirror. Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned Gluck at the end of My Suffering. That was a door.
Yeah.
And sometimes the doors in this house are only open to reveal more doors. I don't know. Something about doors, but maybe we won't.
Yeah.
I do see the Gluck influence. I do see that. Yeah. But before we go any further into the poem, your poem, The Little House on Peach Street, would you like to read it out first?
I will. I'm gonna pull it up real quick. All right. This is actually like one of my longer poems too, so apologies
nice and long,
too.
meaty.
Okay. The Little House on Peach Street. Endless amber glass, spice racks, a proper pantry. We settled in late July, the evening winds mixed with that smell of rain that hangs in the air, next to the new stream of lights we put up. We relish monsoon season. This little place breathes with the wind. It has a heartbeat, a circulatory system. Sometimes we hear it murmuring, and the attic, it whispers to us. You have yet to fill me with your sentimentality, your harbingers, the furniture you don't know where to put. I am just part of these walls now. I noted despondently one evening during a dinner party. I know my words quiver, a mouthful of affections and insults. Sometimes doors in this house only open. The
To
yard was
reveal
always
more
the most
doors.
difficult project. In the beginning, we considered letting the weeds take over, and we'd simply play in the jungle. We didn't want children, but sometimes still, we wanted to be childlike. Instead of a jungle, we came to have planters with tomatoes, an apple tree, and a rose bush snaking up the side of the house. We would still take turns complaining about pulling the weeds. Eventually, when sickness hit, the weeds took over. Hobbies come and go, my abandoned remnants of knitting in the den, but you were always an artist. Charcoal fingerprints adorn the walls. You once drew my portrait, framed it for the entryway. I never shared my drawings with you. I hid them away, not quite as high as the attic, but in a box in the guest room closet. I think I'll try flower pressing next. Sometimes we get out the binoculars and sit on the roof deck. Soft people with a passion for hard sciences, pulsars, black holes. We can't understand quantum physics, but we also can't figure out some of the microwave settings. Extra drywall in the garage, purchased when we repaired a wall I punched. You remarked that I was lucky. I didn't punch one of the brick walls. Rather the wall than your hand, you said. You accidentally damaged more walls, moving furniture into the basement, and then back out again, when you started sleeping in the guest house. Dead weeds, dead leaves cover the guest house now. We swapped weekly dates for weekly therapy. We decorate the stairwell again, and again and again. Do we put a frame here? Let's not. Sometimes what's empty looks better. Animal graveyards in the backyard, dead flowers in the trash can. You still surprise me with sunflowers from the grocery store. I still bring you lavender from my morning walks. You thought there was nothing more splendid than fresh flowers in the house. You said that one's attitude towards flowers says something about their character. How's that? A lot of people don't think they're worth the money because they die so quickly. You said some people just have so little appreciation for that which expires quickly. They cannot enjoy beauty for what it is, while it lasts. What I like is how it still surprises me when you show up with them. Your way of saying, yes, let's invest in the temporary. At some point, we stopped putting candles on birthday cakes, but we still celebrate anniversaries with the vim and vigor of newlyweds. As quickly as the cracks appeared in the house's foundation, so too came stage 4. What is love but dimming lights in the evening, eyes growing heavy, falling asleep with my head in your lap? We all know that the price of being alive is both everything and nothing. Will you let go in this room with me? Yes. I'll fetch the exhaust pipe.
What an incredible poem.
Yeah, amazing.
Thank
you
you.
so much. Very well read. Samantha mentioned before we started our call that she never read a poem aloud before, and I think we really wouldn't be able to tell. It was a very, very, very well read indeed. I think really nice pace, really nice.
I probably can read it actually quite well because this is actually a poem that I've worked quite a lot on since I first wrote it. So I went through several iterations, so I'm fairly familiar with the like the cadence of it by this point. So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, let me start with that because I was actually going to ask about this, about the process of writing this poem.
Mm-hmm.
Let me stay that general with my question. Just tell me about the process.
Okay, so I wrote this poem. I probably first started it in 2020, actually. It was so going back to the memoirish side of things. We had purchased our first house, my husband and I, when I wrote this, and we had also just gotten married. So it was. I had never had like a real house growing up. So I grew up in a trailer park, and like buying your first house like with your husband is like the start of a new life. So I was just kind of thinking through like how house is kind of like the receptacle of memory, I think. And the structure of the poem was always pretty much was it was. It was always kind of broken up into these sections that were sectioned off with these like Roman numerals. And it always had its beginning and its end, where it kind of starts with the house and like moving into the house, but with kind of like this overview of time, where time is almost, I want to say it's almost like someone is looking over like the entirety of these two people's like lifespan in this house. That's always sort of what the structure was, where you kind of get like the hints from the beginning that like these two people have probably passed at this point. And it always did end with that final section where they kind of both let go together. But what would mostly be changing was kind of the bits in between. I would kind of add different stories, either from like we had actually experienced, or ones that I just kind of like thought of, based on like what I kind of project will be, our future together, or perhaps, not. The different, like, we have dogs. Our dogs are currently still with us, thank God. But at one point in our life we will have animal graveyards in the backyard, so it's kind of like that, like thinking through that kind of stuff. So yeah, what mostly would be changing was the like the verses and kind of like the stanzas that sat between, but it did always have that structure. It would just kind of be tweaking uh the stories in between here and there, just as kind of like as they came to me. And I don't even have a strong recollection of kind of like what some of those stories started off as, but it was kind of more, I think, adding gradually just kind of like more detail to them over time. So that was the general process of it. Yeah.
I should probably explain for those of you who are just listening that the poem is in 12 sections, 12 numbered sections, and they're numbered with Roman numerals, just in case.
Good to point out. Yeah.
What strikes me the most about this poem is the we, and that so much of this poem is written in kind of a just a first person plural. And what I absolutely love about this poem is that it does sometimes go to the I and the you, and then also sections like section 6 with the sleep, damaging the wall and sleeping in the guest house, and this kind of really complex but ultimately positive relationship. And you actually as a reader, you can't tell who of the two is actually dying. They kind of blend together at the end completely.
Or both are dying.
Yeah, but I mean, who has the stage 4 cancer?
They both have stage 4, It's kind of, yeah. No, I understand. That'd be something.
Yeah. And even section 9, at some point we stop putting candles on birthday cakes, but we still celebrate anniversaries with the vim and vigor of newlyweds. It's like the individual birthday isn't important anymore, but the kind of the joint birthday, that is still getting celebrated. And the
joined birthday, I really like the way that you put that. I never thought of an anniversary like that before, but yeah, that's a great. I like that you read something into that I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah, what are your thoughts about that, if you have any at this point?
Yeah, I like that you picked up on that, the you and the we and the I, because my intent, I guess, insofar as intent matters in any kind of writing, was I wanted to show like a portrait of a partnership, in this case like an actual marriage, that really in so many words can actually define like the complexity of what it means for two people to build a life together in all of its, the joy and like the very raw love, the eventual grief, but also just the mundanity of what most of life is, but how you're sharing that mundanity together, but always with the perspective that when you are in that kind of partnership, when you are building a life together in the walls of a house, that it is a you and an I, and there is also a we, because you're two flawed, complex individuals that are trying to, in a flawed process, build something bigger than the individual you and I, that it does become like a we. Um, and sometimes, you think of things from your own perspective as an individual. But you also think of your life as a we, because you're not just an I or a you anymore. You are something bigger than that. Yeah, and I think that was a lot of what the intent behind that. I don't even want to say it. No, it's like shifting perspective, but that those kind of changes in the pronouns and such there.
Yeah, I think these are the apart from the last few sections, there's a few moments of this kind of disconnection, and I think that's so those are really the parts of this poem that make the rest shine, if that makes sense, because it could very easily become a sentimental poem about isn't marriage and partnership so beautiful and great, but then partly it is about that, but it's not sentimental. It's because there are these moments of, for example, also, I never shared my drawings with you, I hid them away. There's this, there, it is not all, sunshine and rainbows and we are so connected and we love each other, and of course the section 6 with the drywall, that's the section that adds the most complexity to this poem.
I'll say something there. I do like that there's I think to me, relationships are a mystery that I like to uncover, because no matter how much you love someone and know someone, and you could live with someone for you could share 50, 60 years of your life with someone, and there's something about that other person that you will never actually know because you are not them. Just the kind of the way being in a relationship is kind of almost like a detective, you are just kind of trying to solve the mystery of who this other person that you live in a house with. I've always thought about relationships in that way. And yeah, the kind of the parts of us that we still shield from even the people that love us the most. And, if they do love you, they would love all the parts of you, even the parts of yourself that you don't like. But the natural human shame kind of still always sits with us. And that's what makes relationships complicated still, even several years, maybe even decades into them.
It's one thing that I find very striking about this piece is, you said it was a very long poem, and it is a very long poem, but it is also, could also maybe be seen as a sequence of short poems. A lot of these poems, I think, could stand, a lot of these sections could stand on their own. I don't know. Or the last section is almost like a joke, like a kind of which is a kind of poem in some ways. I don't know. It's a kind of, and I guess my question is about this perspective, about this relationship. Do you imagine this piece as having a consistent speaker, a consistent perspective, or is it some of the sections are from the point of view of one person in the couple and others are from the other person in the couple? It's a question that I have about the piece.
I do think, I feel like when I wrote it, the consistent I was always kind of like, if I'm thinking of it like from my perspective, the I did think of it that way, but I left it like open enough where you can imagine that it's shifting. Um,
Mm,
so
mm,
yeah, I do imagine that that's kind of up to the reader. I wrote it. I wrote it like
yeah.
consistently, but like even
Hmm.
as I was like working through it and I was working on it over time, adding bits here and there, I did realize like if I would put it down for a little while and then come back to it like maybe a couple months later, which is always a good thing, I think, when like
Mm,
you kind of come to something with fresh eyes, to perhaps read it as someone who's never read it might read it. I did pick up on the fact that it might not confusing necessarily, but it might be open to someone reading it from perhaps the different perspective of each person. So I think that that's not how I wrote it,
mm,
but how I think that it can take that life on, I think.
mm.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about poetry is that there's always so much that it can mean without us necessarily intending it. I think it would be if poetry could only mean what the poet kind of intended, it would be very dull probably because
Yeah,
we can only mean that much, but there's always so much
yeah,
more to put into it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess to just pick up on that idea of intentionality, I don't know, like, I think this piece also has a very interesting relationship to time,
Hmm.
because a lot of these sections are kind of hard to place in a, like, obviously the first the first section has to be first, and the 12th section has to be last, but all the
Yeah.
sections in the middle, they feel almost arbitrary in their kind
Yeah.
of placement. And I guess just the kind of the relationship to time in this poem is very interesting to me. Like, like how long, we don't know how long this period of time is. We don't know from what kind of perspective it's being, from what, like, from how far in the past it was. We don't know, like, where the speaker is
Yeah.
standing or the speakers are standing in relationship to the events, and we don't know if the events are presented to us in a linear order. So I think all of that, just, I guess, just like, it's a poem about the passage of time
Yeah.
in so many ways, but it seems to have a slightly complicated relationship to that passage of time. So I don't know if maybe you could say more about that.
Yeah, so it is definitely not linear. I never intended it to
Mm.
be linear because I did kind of like the idea of if the poem actually has like an overarching perspective, I actually think it's almost like what if it's like the house almost telling the
Mm.
Mm.
story of these
Mm-hmm.
two, like it's the house when I moved into our house, or when we moved into our house, it's a house from like 1940.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a house that has seen the lifetimes, or even a part of a lifetime of some people, or perhaps maybe like the totality of a life that maybe a family shared together. But I've always been fascinated about the idea of like the concept of the haunted house almost, and not haunted in the sense of like boo scary, but like the idea of the house as holding uh the memories of times bygone,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that when two people, or multiple people, a family, lives in a house together, the way that we almost attach memories to places and times is, I think important for like how we think about ourselves, but it's also important for like our sense of nostalgia. Yeah, so the house more than anything always feels associated with the family unit and bearing witness almost like the complications of families. So I almost wrote the poem. I wrote at a time when we were just married. We had just moved into our first house. I was decorating the house, and we were kind of in that place where we were really excited about the possibilities, of what we could do with the house. And also thinking about the house as holding the weight of the memories that we've already shared here, the memories that we will share. But the house also represents things like possibilities and fresh starts. So houses almost like take on a life of their own. Like it becomes, I hope that the house kind of almost feels like a character in the story. That was kind of like always like the undercurrent that I wanted to share. So if the house is like a receptacle of memory, I don't think of memory as being quite linear, quite the opposite actually. I feel like we think of things quite non-linearly, if that's a word. So that was what I wanted to hope to convey, like almost like maybe the house is almost telling the story, but also it's like at the end of your life, or like the end of, you know, a partnership or a marriage, however, whatever's coming to like some kind of ending. When you look back at what you shared, you don't necessarily think about that in terms of like sequence. You kind of think about in a very, you know, if you're in a certain room of the house, you're thinking about what happened in that room, or if you're in the backyard, you're thinking about what happened in the backyard, whether that was 10 years ago or yesterday. You know what I mean? So that was to kind of answer the question. I'm thinking of time here almost the way that we think of memories.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, and it really does come across that the house is kind of a character, as you say, and I love how you kind of write about all of the different parts of the house, and even like sitting on the roof and with the binoculars.
Very fictional element. I wish we had a roof deck, but we don't. So
yes. Yeah, and there's kind of, I feel like there's like such a connection between the house and the marriage, in the sense that, you know, when you punch the wall, you kind of break a part of the house, but you also break a part of the kind of trust that you have to your partner. And then there's like a physical removal to the guest house, and then also a moving back in. It's like a disconnection and a reconnection, kind of through the house, and it just it just seems like the house is kind of part of the marriage, and if you tend to the house, then you also tend to the marriage. And or there's I really love should we put a frame here? Let's not, because there's no speaker. It's a kind of call and response. It's a question and answer, but neither of the people are saying it. It's kind of like it's just kind of said into the room, and it's like they both ask the question and they both agree, and it's I don't know, it's really really lovely.
I like what you said about like tending to the house is tending to the marriage, because when you own a home, or if you live in a home, but especially like you own a home as we do, it's a hassle. And like tending to the like I know like it's supposed to, you probably mean it like a bit non-literally, but it is literal, because it's a chore to upkeep a house, especially when you have to, you know, when you're not just like buying groceries for the house or cleaning the house, but you're also having to take care of the house, so that way you can, you know, you don't have a problem with it later, and that's you find out a lot about yourself and your marriage when you're trying to fix things in the house, and when you're trying to keep it up, and you're trying to share that division of labor. And so I like that what you said has both like a non-literal, because like the house is associated with the marriage because it is like that receptacle of the memories, but it is also quite a literal thing, and the mundanity of it. That's I hope what comes across too in some of these is like just the mundanity of sharing a life together. It's a beautiful mundanity to be sure, but it is a lot of like, should we put a frame here? Should we put a frame there?
Yeah,
Like
Yeah.
my husband will laugh at me because sometimes I'll just be like standing in the living room, like kind of like with like that quizzical look on my face, like just looking around the walls, like, should we do something with that area there? Like, is that can we put a reading nook here, or would that look bad? Like,
yeah.
it's that kind of stuff. And he'll laugh at me because I'll just like sometimes be in there for like maybe hours even, just like, does this look right? Should we paint this wall? Should we put an accent wall here? It's like it's the very like
Mm.
mundane stuff that is the it's the meat of a life together. It's the it's what it is. It's sharing that
Mm.
mundanity together. It's the brushing your teeth together at night and getting up in the morning and doing it all over again, kind of bread and butter of what a partnership is.
Yeah, I think that definitely comes across, and especially in section 3 with the yard, it's kind of a similar thing of like, this chore, and but then you still kind of make it so beautiful with the last line. Eventually, when sickness hit, the weeds took over. It's like there's the everyday life, and you take care of the yard, and then you do this and you do that, and then there's like always a kind of interruption to it though, and that obviously also mirrors the very end where there's a much more serious illness kind
Yeah.
of interrupting the not just the maintenance of the house now and of the marriage, but of life itself and kind of sustaining yourself as a biological being.
Yeah.
And very importantly, as quickly as the cracks appeared in the house's foundation, the house is the person and the marriage, and it's kind of all has to be maintained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, like houses require upkeep just as like people do, which is again another part of like the house is like it's always a character. I watch a lot of film too. I'm always like very struck by like when a movie can make the house that its characters live in like almost part of just like such a almost crucial character in the story. And I think a lot of that is also what's influenced how I wrote this poem, because I do like, again, it's the idea of a haunted house. It's uh thinking of all of the past lives that have lived in the walls that I'm living in now, like who who died here, who fell in love here. Yeah, it's the cycles that a house goes through, because I also I'll share too. I also in 2020 when I wrote this, so we had moved into our house. We had just got married, but my father was also ill. And he passed away later that year. So I was familiar too with like the way when like illness just hits a family, the way that again like everything else kind of stops. So you kind of the house lies witness to these cycles that people go through where they take care of the house more than they do at other points. So it's laying witness to the cycles that all lives will go through, because if you share it always strikes me that if you share a long enough life with anyone, someone's always going to go first, no matter what that relationship is. So it's either going to be you or it's going to be the other person, and that's the house feels that too, because then the house kind of takes a hit when anyone is kind of going through not just the process of taking care of someone who is ill, but also in the grief aftermath, where it becomes difficult to even get out of bed in the morning, much less take care of the yard. It's but that's also, if funnily enough, we have a massive yard. Like our actual yard is quite big for perhaps what we've always been willing to upkeep. So there that is kind of quite a literal taking from our lives, because we've never quite had the kind of extra cash you would want to have to really put a lot of work into a yard. So like it's always been kind of going to other things in the house. And like in the summertime when like the weeds are just like, it does kind of look like a jungle out there. It's nice for our dogs because I think that they kind of enjoy like playing in the jungle backyard. But yeah, that was one that I really took quite literally from our lives, because it's like, can we just like let's just let the trees grow. Like
Yeah.
we're not even gonna pretend like we're gonna have time for this.
I I find this so fascinating that you wrote this right after getting married and also buying a house, because it seems like I just see a name attached to the poem, and I don't know at all who's behind that. And I was thinking about this actually today, about if you were gonna be a little older and had kind of seen all this kind of firsthand, because that's really what it feels like. And so it's so interesting that it's actually the opposite, that you wrote it exactly at the beginning of all this, and you could still kind of foresee everything like this, and you didn't have kind of the notion that for you and your husband everything is going to be magical and perfect, and and you're both gonna peacefully die in your sleep exactly at the same time. And it's I don't know, I find this an incredible poem to write for a young person at the beginning of their kind of journey like this. And you talked earlier, I think, when you were talking about writing, or your story with writing, that you kind of like the imagination. You said something about imagination and mixing the kind of autobiographical things with imagination, and I think that really comes across here. And it's interesting that you say that you watch a lot of films as well, because it does feel like almost like a montage or something. That's very, very movie like. And I would like to hear a little bit about kind of this process of imagining. And obviously some things are just directly taken from your life, and some things are, like with your father, kind of taken from people around you and your family history kind of. But what was that process like of kind of pulling these things together and kind of imagining this marriage? And it seems a very kind of, I mean, I don't know I'm not that old yet either to be able to really say what life is like or a long marriage is like, but to me it seems a very realistic kind of imagination of what it's all going to be like, in 50 years from now.
I think that so when I was like a young adult, I never actually imagined that I would get married. I was always I was very realistic about what like an actual partnership would require. It does require some kind of sacrifice. It requires, again, like you will be with someone who, either you go first or they do. And either way, that's difficult. So I've always felt very like realistic about what a marriage was, and I never really thought that it was for me until I like met the person that I was like, oh yeah, like this, hands down, like whatever it takes, I'm willing to go through that, just like because I want to spend my life with this person. So it was, and he kind of felt the same way actually. He never actually imagined himself being married, and then we kind of like found each other, and it was like, okay, we understand now why people are willing to go through all of that kind of sacrifice and pain, is because you do get something for your individual selves, and together you kind of get something much grander and magical, I guess, out of it. So I was always, and again, my father was also dying at this time too, and I was witnessing kind of like the end of a life, and like my own parents' marriage at that time, because he was dying, he was ill, and the way that my mother took care of him, and the way like his own extended family also really, really, really took care of him. So it was kind of this weird time in my life where it was like my life, my partnership was not just starting, because we had known each other for quite a few years, but was starting in this new chapter of actually building a life in a house together, but also seeing the end of something at its end as well. So it was kind of those two culminating factors, I think, that really influenced how I was able to see the realities of what not just a marriage, but just, what any kind of relationship, any kind of family, what eventually happens, and kind of like the cycles of like joy and grief will pepper throughout that partnership, or that family, lifespan. And when I say grief too, it's not just like the end of a life. It's also like grieving the different parts of yourself and the different parts of your marriage that have passed. So again, like, I hope what comes across too is like the part where I talk about like how, that one of the individuals like moves into a guest house. You're kind of like, that's kind of an end point in a sense too. It's like there's pre and post, when this person moved into a guest house, and then there's also the moment pre and post. Perhaps it's not talked about here, but like, as implied, like when they move back into the house. So it's those, like, the way that a life is just kind of broken up into these different, again, sequences, which is what I kind of hope is conveyed throughout the sections of the poem. But like, actually, like, to the actual point of your question about imagination, it was kind of just me thinking of, again, like, imagining what are going to be those stages of our life together, because I did have this like just awareness of what what the realities of any life together with someone is. So it was, it was looking into the backyard and imagining that one day, like, our dogs were going to be out there, and it was imagining that there are parts of this person that I know that I still don't know, and maybe that comes across in the section that you referred to about like the drawings that are still hidden, and you kind of also just become aware of your own patterns as a person, and aware of the patterns of your partner, and the way that like hobbies do come and go. I'm very well aware of the fact that there's probably a million more things that I'll start that I won't finish, and him as well. uh, and that, when you move into a house with someone, I don't think that this was anything about this was something that we undertook lightly. So we're aware of the fact that we're going to annoy each other, and that there's going to be, it's never completely 50-50, that there's always going to be times when someone's doing 70 and someone else is doing 30. And then with that awareness, you hope in the future that if you can only give 30, that your partner will be able to give 70 at that point. Mm-hmm. So it's just like that. I did kind of have like this foresight and awareness of like, what if this marriage is going to work, if it is going to be long lasting, if we are going to get to that end point, the very sad end point where someone goes first, that you have to be able to kind of like work through that stuff, and like have this awareness about what each other's kind of like weaknesses and flaws are. And yeah, the kind of these like individual sections and stories just kind of spun out from that, I think.
Fascinating.
Yeah, very, very fascinating. I want to maybe focus a little more on this idea of hobbies, this hobbies section, and maybe flowers generally, because to me,
Mm-hmm.
this it's the eighth section, which talks about
Yeah.
the flowers. It really strikes me as almost like a thesis statement for the poem, like a kind of,
Mhm.
although this life, this relationship, this house is temporary, although these flowers are temporary, they are still worth it.
Yeah.
Even though we're gonna die, we should still live. Even though, I don't know, and I find that very, very touching and very interesting. And if you look at the kind of hobbies, they're almost not that. Like the kind of astronomy, looking at the stars, is a kind of attempt at something permanent or as close to permanent as anything really gets. And then specifically the pressing of flowers is such a, if flowers are these things that have always rot and died and just temporary, and to have flowers is a kind of movement towards fleeting beauty. What then is pressing a flower? Is that some kind of attempt to make fleeting beauty permanent? I don't know. There's a kind of this idea of permanence
and temporality
temporariness and
and
beauty and everything. I'm just kind of circling around that, I guess. So I don't know what your thoughts about that are.
I'm really, really glad that you picked up on that because the flower section, section 8, is, I did intend that to kind of be, as you put it, a thesis statement of sort for what's happening here because uh my mom always my mom really liked flowers, but she always also said like, oh, you don't have to get me, like she would tell my dad like, you don't have to get me flowers because they just die, they're a waste of money. And I always, me personally, like I really like flowers, my husband also really likes flowers, and we like buying flowers just for the house. And I always thought that that was funny, like such a funny thing to say because yes, of course, like flowers die and you might think of them as a waste of money, but like when I think about just life, like you're not, and again, like with the astronomy thing, like if we're thinking about the universe as like this, we're so small, our lives are so small in comparison to the whole universe. It almost seems silly to kind of have that perspective, in my opinion, because it's almost like saying like in contrast to the universe, it's almost like saying like I shouldn't invest in myself and my life, because that is it's so temporary in comparison to the vastness of the universe and the vastness of time. So I kind of buy flowers almost as a way of thinking like, yes, these are going to die. They're probably going to die quite quickly. They'll probably die within a week, but they they opened up like the beauty of the house for a little bit of that time that they got to spend in it. And that was that was kind of the thesis statement of the poem to me, is because like you are, when you're trying to build a life together, that's exactly what you're doing. You're investing in the temporary. And I could have I could have walked away from the possibility of this relationship with my husband, and said, I don't want to deal with the the sacrifice and the grief and the hardships that we'll face together. But then it's like, well, what a loss. Why would I not invest in that if it's giving this kind of beautiful, complicated purpose and beauty to my life? And again, I like that you really drew uh, that connection between like the astronomy and the the temporality of flowers, but also like the pressing of them, which is again like that's memory. It's almost like, or even like writing, the process of writing, of trying to capture memory, is you are trying to put some kind of permanence to something that has passed. And the flower, when you press the flower and it is dried, I do actually press flowers, I really like pressing flowers, and it's not the flower that it was when it was alive. It looks quite different, but it does have it takes on like a new beauty. It takes on a new form, and it's not what it was, the liveliness that it had. And maybe now it just kind of like sits in a scrapbook or something, but it evolved in a sense, and you try to capture you're never going to quite capture a memory the way that it actually played out. Like memories, you know, they're filtered through our like perspectives and stuff. You're never going to quite capture what a moment exactly was, but you're going to be able to maybe capture what it felt, or what it felt like, or capture it in some kind of new form to let it live on, not exactly as it happened, but let it kind of live on perhaps in a new life. And maybe that's what I think of like writing this poem as, is as like the receptacle of memory. It's a way to kind of put down, you know, some things that I've lived through, but in a new form.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I would like to talk about the ending, the very last section, because I said to Chris earlier, oh, did I read that correctly? Like, are they like committing suicide together? And then Chris was like,
That's
oh,
how I wrote it.
It was a
yeah.
I thought it was like a joke, like someone's kind of making a joke.
Like
It
as
was
if they
like the
were gonna.
response, yes, I'll fetch the exhaust pipe, is meant as a
It
joke.
it can be a joke.
And even just generally, can you talk a little bit about this ending, what it means to you, or where it came from, or what do you think about it?
Yeah. So I did write it quite kind of literally, in the sense that what I'm envisioning here is that, you know, someone is sick, they're dying. The other person just decides to go with them at that point. So it was literal, but I like that you thought of it as a joke, because actually we joke about that, me and my husband, all the time. Like, oh, if you go, then I'm just going too. Like, it's just like, what's the point? Like, it's, you know, that we have that joke between us now. So the fact that you read that, that makes me happy, because if it's almost like that thing where like you're writing something that you didn't know that you were writing, because maybe in some sense, like, that we do kind of have that joke between us, that kind of maybe fed a little bit into how I ended up writing it. So that amuses me a lot. But I guess I wanted to bring, I did want the poem to have some kind of closure, like something about like I wanted to bring like that life together to an end. So for me, that was sort of like the intent behind that, I think. But I do sort of romanticize, I guess, the idea of like, at some point, you know, perhaps, you know, if my spouse was to pass, maybe there's a life to be had after that. But I like the idea of like, oh, well, you know, as our life comes to an end, you know, how do you envision the end of your own life? Do you see your life after this person? Do you have only wanted to live a life with this person? Is it, you know, it's just, it was kind of like thinking that through. And then we do kind of have like that joke between us where like, would I even want to be here if you're not here? So I just simply liked, I think, that idea of closure, and how the person that I say that I would die for, you know, would I actually die for that person? And that's kind of just like an open-ended question, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that it can be interpreted as a joke. It's like,
yeah,
makes it kind of a more realistic kind of ending, to have one person kind of joke about that and then have to, you know, live on. So but you can also read it as as a kind of literal ending.
Yeah.
That's so the poem, without you even meaning to, kind of resists the closure that you wanted to give it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, and I guess
that's
the
what's
ending.
good about it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
because it is funny because now that I am reading it, like, oh yeah, it can totally be read that way. And
Yeah.
that's really amusing to me. And I hope that other people, whoever reads it, also has that experience with it.
It strikes me now that this penultimate line, "Will you let go in this room with me?" That could mean, should we both let go together in this room?
Yeah.
Or does it mean, will you let go and I'll be here with you?
Mm-hmm.
You could see either they could both be letting
true.
go, as in they're letting go with one another, or one of them is letting go with the other person there, but staying. So that is also
Yeah.
interesting.
I see that.
And that's nice too, because I like that there's a sense that you can also, or like any reader can project what they see as closure or an ending. Like if you do choose to, if you decide to leave with your partner, or if you decide, or if you envision that you will have to build like your next chapter after them. um Again, it's about bringing that life, as like the house knows it, that collective life that was shared, like to some kind of closure. So whether or not you kind of read like a suicide pact into it, or something else, again, it's about that ending, whatever that ending looks like. But it's certainly the ending of something.
Definitely. I feel like that brings us very perfectly to ask our final question as well.
Come to our ending.
Our final question is, what is your perspective, or what do you think about the place that writing, and particularly poetry, but just any literature, have in the culture at the moment?
So I'm a teacher, so I work with a lot of students who are, obviously just kind of starting out their independent lives. I do read like quite a bit of criticism, but I also just read like a lot of like really like silly discourse about things too. And I do think that like generally with literature, it does feel more vital to me like now than ever, just because I feel like with AI, with social media, I do think it's become like more difficult for people to just read and analyze a text. So I feel like people tend to come to a lot of like discussions of art with a lot of bad faith takes on things. It's a lot of stuff that to me just kind of like sounds like sound bites, because that's kind of what the culture is right now. Is just kind of a lot of sound bites. So I think literature has always been important to me for learning empathy, for learning how to empathize, not just in like the sense of, how do I empathize with people like who aren't me or don't look like me, or people that I don't know. It's also, I think, just about learning how to like submit yourself to another author's vision. And that doesn't mean you don't come to art with your own interpretations of things. It's more about like just having to confront like things that you might have previously believed, learning how to like reform your beliefs, or just even like sit with conflicting ideas, that kind of like just being able to hold two truths. I feel like the only way to live in the world is to be able to really sit with multiple truths. And I think that that's uncomfortable for a lot of people to reckon with, especially now, where I think we try to boil a lot of stuff down to like this is just how it is. There isn't any complexity or nuance to stuff. But particularly with poetry to me has always felt like a complete distillation of feeling and emotion. There's not, at least like in a lot of the poetry that I like, there's not a whole lot of logic, which is always what was interesting and compelling to me about reading and writing poetry. Is it's a story, but it's a story that's almost like just completely distilled down to just like the raw feeling of whatever the author is intending there. So I think that's sitting with feeling and having to confront feelings, whether they be your own or whatever feeling you think like an author is trying to convey through something. I do think that that's more important than ever in the culture, because I don't know, I often feel like people just don't feel enough in a lot of ways. So in just like interacting with my students and stuff, I worry a lot for them and what their like futures look like, even like professionally, but also just how they're able to develop like real, like all consuming passions for art. That's my general take on things. I don't know if you have any questions about that. I can expand on things if you would like me to.
Yeah, you say like a lot of discussion about art is like sound bites.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate on that slightly? Like what kind of, do you have some examples for us?
I don't have like strict examples. Again, I said like I watch a lot of movies, and it feels to me like a lot of criticism about anything really, but especially I'm thinking of films and such. It's kind of boiled down to it's a lot of rage bait culture, I guess is what I would say. It's a lot of like what's the thing that I can say that will just most like just like light a fire under the asses of some people that like want to like disagree or something. It's a lot of that kind of stuff. It's a lot of stuff that is nicely boiled down into like what's a headline that's just going to make people like angry or emotional or something. And it's just not as thoughtful, I guess, because it is, as we're trying to boil things down into like sound bites, because it's, on TikTok or, an Instagram reel or something. It's, people aren't just like sitting to read something anymore. It's just a lot of what is going to come up on, someone's like algorithm feed or something. So I think that that's kind of what I mean by that. It all feels less genuine to me, I guess, and more about, okay, what's just going to like, how can I rage bait someone in order to like set them off,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess like there's kind of a list of takes you can have.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
Kind of got to find the right one for this piece of art.
Exactly, yeah, and that can be both. Like, it can be both in terms of like praise or criticism, because maybe you're just like kind of like giving like an effusive praise to something because that's satisfying, I guess, or or intentionally like taking a piece of art down instead of actually just like sitting with the art or thinking about it or having just like the good faith discussion about it instead of kind of like the knee-jerk reactionary kind of stuff that I think populates a lot of culture today.
Totally.
Yeah, this really reminds me of we watched the new Hamlet movie the other
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
And before I watched it, I asked my best friend, "Oh, have you seen that film?" And she was like, "No, I haven't yet. But I heard on TikTok that it's just like trauma porn." And I was like, okay, weird. And then
Yeah.
I watched the film and I was like, how incredibly cynical is it to call a film about grief trauma porn? It wasn't trauma porn, but you can just so imagine
Yeah.
that people on TikTok would call it that. You know, it's sad and it's about someone dying, so it must be trauma porn. And it's just
Yeah.
so bizarre. Just the way that we don't actually, I don't know, that our culture doesn't really engage with art in a very deep and profound level often.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about too. And that's a very good point because I've also seen similar stuff about Hamnet. So it was a movie that I mean, I enjoyed the film and I certainly didn't think that it was just like trauma porn. It's it is a depiction of grief, and I think it's a bit unfair to just call, you know, a mother's grief for, spoiler alert, like her dying child, just to boil that down to trauma porn, especially when I don't think the film is kind of unnecessarily gratuitous about it in any sense. It's just, it, to me personally, it feels extremely um real, but also the film is also just, you know, it's trying to make a point about grief and the power of healing through art. And yeah, to again, like, just if you have criticisms about the film, it's fine to talk about those criticisms, and it in fact is encouraged, but just boiling it down to something like trauma porn is silly, and it really does no one any favors. When I think we're at an inflection point in the world today, when I think we need more nuance and empathy than ever, and a lot of that just gets lost when we can't actually have good faith discussions about any art, but, you know, literature, to the, you know, the specific interests of reading into culture.
Totally.
Yeah, and this is often what poetry kind of does as well. It makes you hold two truths at the same time. Like, your ending can be read one way or the other way, and even if you now said this one's the correct one, you don't have that sort of power over the poem. It's its own thing, and you just kind of have to hold these separate truths together. And that's a really good point, that kind of art often gives us that ability that we also very much need in other parts of our life.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess I think to like really engage with art, you've got to kind of allow for the possibility that you might be changed. That requires a kind of openness and a vulnerability that is difficult. It's difficult to do that. It's difficult to approach something and think this thing might change me completely in some way, and that's, you know, that's kind of what it requires on some level to kind of really engage with something. I don't know, and that does seem kind of, that's tricky because I feel like kind of the discourse, the algorithms and the metrics really reward insincerity, and they really reward kind of being pithy, being concise, being trite, and they kind of reward a kind of, even like that's not that deep, a kind of approach that presents the truth as easy and obvious in either political direction, in any kind of, and then that doesn't really, what it doesn't encourage is a kind of vulnerable capacity for change that is required for art somehow. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense, because that's exactly what I sort of fear is going on now. Is like, I feel like people bring a lot of like their preconceived notions of what the world is and should be to things, whereas, which is, I think, okay, like, and that's it's good to an extent, but I don't think it's I think it's sort of backfiring, like even what the point of reading anything or watching anything is, which is to kind of come with your preconceived notions of what the world is and then kind of think about like how that's in conversation with whatever an artist is trying to say. And again, maybe you come away feeling the same about, what your ideas of the world are, or maybe you come away having reformed something. But it's I think it's always about approaching things honestly. And that's what I feel is going on, is like people don't really approach things as honestly anymore, or at least a lot of people don't anymore. There's still a lot of really good you know critics and writers, and but I like, if we're thinking about culture at large and just like the things that I read and see, I do feel like there's a lot less approaching things honestly. And especially like if you are like the example that you use, if you're interested in Hamnet and you think, I want to see this, but you're seeing and reading about it is that, oh, it's like this trauma porn, that kind of influences, I think, how you come into it, because then you kind of have all these voices already in your head having told you prematurely like how you should feel about something. And that's why I think it's important now to just, if we want to, if we necessarily say we should be changing the culture, but I think that if you want to have a good and healthy culture, and certainly a culture of people who are engaging with that culture honestly, it really does start with the self and just learning how to be in conversation, I guess, with literature and art in a way that is, honest and empathetic.
So before we say goodbye, would you like to read the poem one more time with everything that we have in mind?
I will do. And I like that you do this because, perhaps after the conversation that's had, if you read it again, people might see something else in it. The Little House on Peach Street. Endless amber glass, spice racks, a proper pantry. We settled in late July. The evening winds mixed with that smell of rain that hangs in the air, next to the new stream of lights we put up. We relish monsoon season. This little place breathes with the wind. It has a heartbeat, a circulatory system. Sometimes we hear it murmuring. And the attic, it whispers to us. You have yet to fill me with your sentimentality, your harbingers, the furniture you don't know where to put. I am just part of these walls now, I noted despondently one evening during a dinner party. I know my words quiver, a mouthful of affection and insults. Sometimes doors in this house only open to reveal more doors. The yard was always the most difficult project. In the beginning, we considered letting the weeds take over, and we'd simply play in the jungle. We didn't want children, but sometimes still, we wanted to be childlike. Instead of a jungle, we came to have planters with tomatoes, an apple tree, and a rose bush snaking up the side of the house. We would still take turns complaining about pulling the weeds. Eventually, when sickness hit, the weeds took over. Hobbies come and go, my abandoned remnants of knitting in the den. But you were always an artist. Charcoal fingerprints adorn the walls. You once drew my portrait, framed it for the entryway. I never shared my drawings with you. I hid them away, not quite as high as the attic, but in a box in the guest room closet. I think I'll try flower pressing next. Sometimes we get out the binoculars and sit on the roof deck. Soft people with a passion for hard sciences. Pulsars, black holes. We can't understand quantum physics, but we also can't figure out some of the microwave settings. Extra drywall in the garage. Purchased when we repaired a wall I punched. You remarked that I was lucky I didn't punch one of the brick walls. Rather the wall than your hand, you said. You accidentally damaged more walls, moving furniture into the basement, and then back out again, when you started sleeping in the guest house. Dead leaves cover the guest house door now. We swapped weekly dates for weekly therapy. We decorate the stairwell again and again and again. Should we put a frame here? That's not. Sometimes what's empty looks better. Animal graveyards in the backyard. Dead flowers in the trash can. You still surprise me with sunflowers from the grocery store, and I still bring you lavender for my morning walks. You thought there was nothing more splendid than fresh flowers in the house. You said that one's attitude towards flowers says something about their character. How's that? A lot of people don't think they're worth the money because they die so quickly. You said some people just have so little appreciation for that which expires quickly. They cannot enjoy beauty for what it is, while it lasts. What I like is how it still surprises me when you show up with them. Your way of saying, yes, let's invest in the temporary. At some point, we stopped putting candles on birthday cakes, but we still celebrate anniversaries with the vim and vigor of newlyweds. As quickly as the cracks appeared in the house's foundation, so too came stage 4. What is love but dimming lights in the evening, eyes growing heavy, falling asleep with my head in your lap? We all know that the price of being alive is both everything and nothing. Will you let go in this room with me? Yes, I'll fetch the exhaust pipe.
Amazing.
The
Thank
end.
you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for reading that. And I guess with that, I'll say goodbye. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. This has been quite a long chat, but it's a long poem, and I think it's been fully deserved. And to the audience, I'll say thank you very much for watching. It's been a real pleasure having this chat. I hope you liked it too. And if you want to read Samantha's piece, The Little House on Peach Street, it's available on our website, readingintoculture.com, as well as loads more pieces from our spring 2026 edition that are all very good, I think, if I say so myself. And we'll have new podcast episodes every Sunday. So please watch them / listen to them. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.